There are moments in life when everything you believed, everything you trusted, shatters in a single moment of recognition. A man worked 40 years of his life, pouring sweat and sacrifice into raising his son, teaching him right from wrong, building his future with his bare hands. But what happens when that son forgets? What happens when the family he trusted becomes the predator he feared? This is the story of Marcus Sterling, a retired construction worker, a father who did everything right, a man who was left to starve while his own family lived in luxury. But what they didn't know, what they never expected, was that Marcus had a son who would move mountains to save him, a son who would burn it all down to get justice. Welcome back to Dad's Powerful Revenge. This story will break your heart, but the ending will remind you why fathers never truly give up. Let's begin. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came from a neighbor. A simple text message, 4 words that would change everything. I found your father. James Sterling had been working overseas for the past 6 months, building infrastructure in the Middle East, sending money home like clockwork, believing his family was safe, believing his aging father was being cared for. But sometimes belief, is the most dangerous thing we possess. When James got that text, he called immediately. What he heard on the other end of the line, what his neighbor described, would haunt him for the rest of his life. His father who had raised him, who had taught him everything about honor and sacrifice, was at the corner store, in the middle of the afternoon, asking strangers for food. He was begging, James, literally begging. His hands were shaking, he had a fever, he looked like a ghost, and he kept saying the same thing over and over. Please, just a little food, my family won't give me any. When you hear those words, when you realize the person you love most is suffering because of the people closest to him, everything else stops mattering. James Sterling made a choice that day, a choice that would expose decades of betrayal, a choice that would tear his family apart, but a choice that would save his father's life. This is how it all happened. Meet Marcus Sterling, 68 years old, a man who built this city with his own 2 hands. For 43 years, he worked construction, rain or shine, sickness or health. He never missed a day because his son was counting on him. Every dollar he earned went into one thing, James's future. Private school, college tuition, opportunities Marcus never had. By the time James graduated and got a good job, Marcus had given everything, his youth, his health, his savings. But he had no regrets, because his son was free. 3 years ago, Marcus met someone. Her name was Patricia. She seemed perfect on the surface, kind, attentive, grateful to have a man in her life. She had a teenage daughter named Sophie, 14 years old, struggling with some behavioral issues. But Patricia said James's presence in their life would fix that. So James married her. He thought he was giving his father a second chance at happiness. He thought he was building a blended family. He was walking into a carefully constructed trap. At first, everything seemed normal. James went to work, saved money, made plans for the future. He traveled for business sometimes, 3 weeks here, 4 weeks there. But while he was gone, while he was working and earning and trusting, something sinister was happening at home. And Marcus was too proud to say anything. Marcus started keeping a diary, not because he wanted to complain, but because he had no one else to talk to. No one who would listen, no one who cared. Here are his words, unedited, from the months of suffering. Day 1, Patricia says I need to stay home more. Says I'm tiring myself out. Told me I should rest. Maybe she's right. I am tired. Day 15, she locked the refrigerator. Says it's for my health. I'm eating too much, she says. I'm 68 and way less than when I was 20. I don't understand. Day 34, my tools are gone. All of them. She sold them. Said we needed the money for Sophie's school. But James pays for Sophie's school. I didn't ask where the money went. Day 47. Today is my birthday. Nobody remembered. Patricia said we don't celebrate anymore. She said it's wasteful. I made myself a small plate of rice from yesterday's leftovers. I ate it alone in my room. Day 62. I tried calling James. The phone went to voicemail. Then the line went dead. Patricia says she's handling the technical stuff. Says I shouldn't worry my mind with such things. I worry anyway. Day 89. I am so hungry. This is embarrassing to write, but I am so hungry. I asked Patricia if I could eat some of the chicken she bought. She said it was for Sophie. Only Sophie. I went to bed with just water. Day 101. I went to Mrs. Patterson's house next door. I asked if I could borrow some rice. She looked at me like I was dying. Maybe I am. The shame was worse than the hunger. For 101 days, Marcus Sterling suffered in silence, while his son was working overseas, sending money every single month, while his son believed everything was fine. His own wife, was systematically destroying his father's life. Not out of necessity, not out of desperation, but out of pure, calculated greed. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that Marcus let it happen because he didn't want to burden his son, because he was ashamed, because pride can sometimes be the most destructive emotion of all. When James arrived home, the first thing he noticed was his father's absence. Usually Marcus would be waiting, smiling, asking about the trip. This time the house felt empty. Not just empty of people, empty of life. Marcus was staying with Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor, the woman who had witnessed his degradation. When James walked in and saw his father, something inside him broke. Marcus was skeletal, feverish, confused. The man who had built cities with his bare hands could barely lift his head. The first lie came immediately. Patricia said Marcus was just getting old, said he was naturally declining, said he'd always been prone to exaggeration. But James knew his father, and this wasn't exaggeration. This was destruction. He called a doctor. The diagnosis came back within 2 hours: severe malnutrition, dehydration, pneumonia, untreated for weeks. The doctor said if James had waited much longer, his father would have died. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but slowly, quietly, forgotten. That's when James Sterling became someone different. That's when the son became the hunter. James began with the basics: bank records, phone records, credit reports. Starting 18 months ago, Patricia had been bleeding his father's account dry. Every single deposit James made automatically. Within 48 hours, most of it was transferred to another account, an account belonging to Patricia's sister, Victoria. But it wasn't just theft. It was systematic, calculated financial destruction. 3 fraudulent personal loans totaling $31,000, each one taken out in Marcus's name, with forged signatures and fabricated income documentation. 4 credit cards opened secretly, over $19,000 in fraudulent charges, designer bags, jewelry, vacations, all paid for with money stolen from a starving old man. But the financial theft was only the beginning. The physical abuse, the psychological control, that required deeper investigation. James hired a forensic accountant, a private investigator, a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse cases. And together, they built a file so comprehensive, so damning, that it would destroy Patricia's entire existence. The deeper James dug, the darker the truth became. It wasn't just about money. Patricia had systematically isolated his father, changed his phone number, told him the line was malfunctioning, locked him in the house, told him it was for his health, monitored every interaction with the outside world, cut him off from his neighbors, from his friends, from anyone who could help. And most disturbing of all, she had been documenting it, in photographs, in messages to her sister, in casual conversation with friends. She was proud of what she was doing. She was proud of starving an old man. The investigator found receipts for luxury items purchased during weeks when Marcus had no food. Designer handbags while Marcus ate rice porridge. Spa treatments while Marcus had untreated pneumonia. Jewelry while Marcus's medical bills went unpaid. One receipt stood out: a Vera Wang gown, $4,200, purchased 3 weeks after Marcus had gone 7 days without eating. The gown was for Sophie's birthday party, a celebration of luxury and excess, while the man who had raised Sophie's stepbrother was literally starving to death. James also discovered something else, something that would change everything. When Patricia married James, there had been paperwork, power of attorney documents, co-signatory agreements, all signed by James supposedly, all authorizing Patricia to make financial decisions. But James never signed them. The signatures were forgeries, good forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. Patricia had literally stolen his identity, used it to control his father's money, used it to commit fraud, used it to build a prison around an elderly man. At this point, James had enough evidence to destroy Patricia, to destroy her sister, to bring down the entire operation. But there was one more piece of the puzzle, one more revelation that would transform this from a case of elder abuse into something far more complicated, something that would shake the very foundations of James's world. During one of their investigative sessions, the private investigator presented James with something unexpected: a document, a birth certificate, and a request for a genetic test. "I need you to understand something," the investigator said. "When we were reviewing financial records, we found something odd. Sophie's school is expensive, very expensive, but there's no tuition being paid for Sophie. You're paying it, under the assumption that Sophie is your biological daughter. But I ran a background check, and I found Sophie's original birth certificate, from before Patricia remarried, from before she even knew you. Sophie was born to Patricia and another man, a man named Thomas, a man who left when Sophie was 3, a man who to this day has never paid child support. You've been raising another man's daughter, but more importantly, you've been led to believe Sophie was yours as leverage, as a reason to marry Patricia quickly. as a way to obligate you financially, as a method of control. James didn't respond immediately. The realization was too much. For 15 years he had raised Sophie, given her everything, paid for her school, treated her like his own, all based on a lie. But there was one way to be absolutely certain, one test that would remove all doubt. James obtained hair samples from Sophie's hairbrush. He submitted them for DNA testing. The results came back 72 hours later. 0% probability of biological paternity. Confirmed with 99.97% accuracy. Sophie was not his daughter. She never had been. She was Patricia's biological child. From a relationship that ended before James even knew Patricia existed. Everything was a lie. The marriage, the family, the obligation, all constructed on deception. But here's the thing about lies of this magnitude. They don't just hurt the people directly involved. They ripple outward. They infect everything they touch. And Sophie was a victim too. Caught in her mother's web, used as a tool of manipulation. Told she was legitimate, that she belonged, when in reality, she was just another tool in Patricia's arsenal. James waited 2 weeks. 2 weeks of living in the house with Patricia. 2 weeks of watching her sleep soundly while his father suffered in a neighbor's home. 2 weeks of collecting final evidence, final documentation, final proof. He had a plan he discussed with his father, a plan his father initially tried to talk him out of. Son, Marcus said, revenge will only destroy you. But James wasn't interested in revenge. He was interested in justice, in accountability, in making sure Patricia could never do this to anyone else again. And he had chosen the perfect venue. Sophie's 18th birthday was coming up. Patricia had already started planning. A lavish party, expensive venue, hundreds of guests, all paid for with stolen money, all designed to present the image of a perfect family, all designed to hide the darkness underneath. Patricia had always been obsessed with appearances, with being seen as successful, as lucky, as blessed. The party was her masterpiece, her final statement that she had won, but she had no idea that her own stepdaughter's birthday would be the stage for her complete and utter destruction. The night of the party arrived. The venue was spectacular. The weather was perfect. The guest list included everyone who mattered. Business associates, friends, family, everyone who had ever doubted her would now see her success, or so she thought. Marcus arrived in a wheelchair, still recovering from his illness, still frail, but his eyes were clear, his mind was sharp. He knew what was about to happen. James stood backstage with his lawyer, with documented evidence of every crime, with copies of every forged document, with proof of every stolen dollar. And then, the DJ announced the father's toast. James stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent. Everyone was expecting a heartfelt father's toast, a celebration of his daughter's achievements, a moment of family pride. What they got instead was the truth, and the truth was devastating. Good evening. Thank you all for celebrating Sophie's adulthood with us. I need to talk about what it means to be a man, what it means to take care of family, what it means to put others' needs before your own. I learned that from my father, the man sitting right there, Marcus Sterling. My father built this city with his bare hands for 43 years, 6 days a week, every season. He did that so I could go to school, so I could get a good job, so I could have opportunities he never had. There were nights when we had nothing but rice for dinner. My father never complained. My father never asked for anything back. He just gave. But 6 months ago, while I was working overseas believing he was safe, while I was sending money home every single month, my father was being starved. He was being isolated, locked away. His phone was cut off. His food was rationed. He was treated like a prisoner in his own home, and nobody stopped it. My father was so ashamed that he never told me. He kept a diary, a journal of his suffering, because he had no one else to talk to. And in that diary he wrote, "I am so hungry. I am ashamed. I don't want to burden my son." While those words were being written, someone in this family was spending $20,000 on a single wardrobe. Someone in this family was stealing from an elderly man's account. Someone in this family was committing fraud, forgery, and systematic elder abuse. And that someone is my wife, Patricia Del Santos. Stand up. I know these are serious accusations, but I have documentation for every single one. Bank records, forged documents, medical reports, testimony from the investigator, 18 months of systematic theft, totaling over $52,000, 3 fraudulent loans taken out in my father's name, 4 credit cards opened without his knowledge, proof that you changed the passwords on his phone and email, proof that you locked his bedroom door at night, proof that you intentionally starved him while spending luxury money on yourself and your sister Victoria. And I have proof that Victoria assisted in every single transaction, that she helped you move the money through her own account, that she was complicit in this crime. The room erupted. But James wasn't finished. He had one more revelation, one more truth that needed to be spoken. There's one more thing, one more lie that needs to be exposed tonight. Sophie, sweetheart, please come up here. 8 years ago, Patricia told me that Sophie was my biological daughter. She said there had been a relationship before we met. She said I had a responsibility to raise her. She presented this as an obligation, an unavoidable commitment. And like the fool I was, I believed her, without question, without verification, without hesitation, because I thought that's what it meant to be a father, to accept any child who needed one. So I raised you, Sophie. For 8 years. I paid for your school, your clothes, your future. I was there for every milestone, every heartbreak, every moment. I loved you. But 2 weeks ago I had a DNA test done, not because I stopped loving you, but because I needed to understand the extent of the deception. The results came back yesterday, 0% probability of biological paternity. Confirmed with absolute certainty, you are not my biological daughter, Sophie. But here's what I need you to understand. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. I didn't love you because of a piece of paper from a lab. I didn't love you because of DNA. I loved you because you were my child. Because you needed a father and I chose to be one. Because love isn't something that only works one direction. Your mother used you as leverage. She told you that if you revealed the truth I would leave, that I would stop loving you, that you would be abandoned again. But that's not how love works. Real love doesn't depend on biology. Real love doesn't disappear when the truth comes out. Real love is exactly what I'm telling you right now. I'm still your father. Not by blood, but by choice. And I will always choose you. That will never change. The room was silent. Even in her moment of exposure, Patricia tried to reframe the narrative. I did it all for us, she said. I was scared of losing everything. But James's response was swift and absolute. You did it for yourself. You used my father as a personal bank account. You used my love for Sophie as a weapon. You used family as a shield for your own greed. Tomorrow morning I'm filing formal charges. Financial fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, forgery. You'll answer for all of it in court, and you'll spend the next several years explaining your crimes to a judge. Patricia tried to bargain, tried to offer repayment, tried to say she'd change. But it was too late. The moment had passed, the truth was out, and there was no going back. Patricia Del Santos was convicted on all counts. 48 months in federal prison, restitution of $54,000 to Marcus, a permanent record that would follow her for the rest of her life. Victoria, her sister and co-conspirator, received 36 months. Her financial opportunities destroyed, her reputation ruined. She would spend her 40s behind bars, a fitting punishment for stealing from an elderly man. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the recovery. Marcus's health improved dramatically within weeks. Proper nutrition, medical care, peace of mind. Within 3 months, he was back to his old self, stronger than he'd been in years. Because knowing he was believed, knowing his suffering mattered. That was the best medicine of all. And Sophie had to navigate something far more complicated. She wasn't a victim in the legal sense, but she was a victim of manipulation and deception. James gave her time and space to process, didn't rush her, didn't demand anything from her, just reminded her constantly, you're still my daughter, that hasn't changed, that will never change. 6 months after the trial, Sophie came to James. I know what Mom did was wrong, she said, and I know you're not my biological father, but I also know that you're still my dad, the only dad I've ever really wanted, and I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that. This is where the real story ends, not in the courtroom, not with a prison sentence, but with the restoration of family, with the understanding that biology doesn't define bonds, that love is more powerful than any lie, that justice can actually heal, not just punish. आज हम उस शख्स का सम्मान कर रहे हैं जिसने सच्चाई और हिम्मत की एक मिसाल पेश की है। दौलत कमाने वाले बहुत हैं, पर भरोसा जीतने वाले बिरले। विक्रम जी जिंदाबाद। मैंने तुम्हें पहचानने में देर कर दी। विक्रम, जब तुम्हें मेरी सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरत थी, मैं तुम्हारे साथ ना थी। गलतियां इंसान से होती हैं, पर रिश्ते उन्हें मिटाने के लिए होते हैं। क्या हम फिर से शुरुआत कर सकते हैं? अगर दिल से कह रही हो, तो हमेशा हाँ। देखा विक्रम, जिसे लोग असफल कहते थे, आज वही शहर की शान है। ये मेरी नहीं, उन सब की जीत है, जिन्होंने मुश्किलों में सीधा रास्ता नहीं छोड़ा। ईमानदारी का रास्ता कठिन है, पर अंत में वही सबसे ऊंचा उठता है, जो हालातों में भी अपना चरित्र नहीं बेचता। 2 years have passed since that night at Sophie's party. Marcus is thriving. He started a woodworking business with his friend. He's mentoring young people about construction trades. He's rebuilding his life with dignity and purpose. James has built a healthier life too. He's learned that sometimes family is bound by choice, not biology. That love requires action and protection. That speaking truth, even when it shatters everything, is sometimes necessary. And Sophie has become an advocate, speaking to other children about recognizing manipulation, helping people in abusive situations escape, turning her pain into purpose. This is the power of choosing right over comfortable, of choosing truth over appearances, of choosing love over blood. If you or someone you know is experiencing elder abuse, call the Elder Care Locator at 1-800-677-1116. Report to Adult Protective Services. Call the National Center on Elder Abuse hotline. You are not alone. And like Marcus, you can be rescued. This is Dad's Powerful Revenge. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more stories of justice, resilience, and the power of family. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's justice. It's recovery. It's love that chooses to stay. See you next time.